This is MagnetiK Mumma, the podcast where we parent with nervous system wisdom, soul-led grit, and zero shame. Hey, I'm Steph, your holistic nurse, writer, and a mum who is keeping it real while living in the chaos. And I'm giving you permission to raise resilient kids without losing yourself. Because when you thrive, your kids can too. So let's get into the messy middle and find our magic. Hey there, and welcome back to MagnetiK Mumma. I'm Steph, your host, and today I want to talk about something that touches every part of our lives, relationships. And not just the romantic ones, but friendship, family, and the everyday connections that shape us and shape your kids. So first of all, I want to be very clear. I'm not a relationship expert, but what I am is a parent, a facilitator of workshops around relationship, and someone who's worked with young people for years, including in programs like LoveBites, which focuses on building awareness around respectful relationships and identifying red flags. So this is a conversation, not a lecture, and it's exploring with some stories and some science and some messy truths. So I hope you enjoy this. I think it's really important to understand as parents our connection to relationships and what that looks like. And just to reconfirm that nothing has to be perfect, and there are no perfect relationships, but we do know that there are healthier relationships than some, and we will kind of explore the difference between, unhealthy relationships and abusive relationships, because that's a whole different world. So, just want to distinguish the difference, and if it is an abusive relationship, then please seek help, because that requires a whole different level of support. So what I'm talking about is Western culture and the perception of love and marriage, and how it's sort of been connected to personal fulfillment, it's not, different cultures have different perception of relationship, marriage, and love. Whereas in the West here, we've kind of jumped on this Hollywood bandwagon of fairy tales, Disney, rom-coms, and the media sort of shaping what we think relationships should look like. But in contrast to this, the reality is relationships are often messy, full of friction, sometimes require repair and resilience and robustness. So I know my perception of relationships was definitely conditioned by the way that I grew up, and I think I often did have some fairy tale ideals about love, romance, and marriage. So definitely having to reteach myself and explore on a much deeper level what the meaning of love is for me, and then how that plays out in my relationships. And so some of the patterns I developed were beautiful and helped me connect deeply, and others left me stranded in situations I didn't know how to navigate. And even though I tried to do relationships differently to my parents, my defaults often got in the way. And so I've spent a lot of time self-reflecting and healing those inner child misconceptions about love, romance, and relationship. But it also got me asking myself, what are the messages I'm sending to my kids? And that definitely influences my current thinking. My kids are tweens and teens, and there's lots of discussion around relationships at the moment, and I'm very, very conscious of what my relationship looks like with my husband and what we're projecting and reflecting onto them. And I'm not sure what the outcome will be because only time will tell, but I think having that awareness and knowing that no relationship is perfect is a pretty good start in giving them a balanced view. But as I said, it's not perfect. I've made lots of mistakes. My husband's made lots of mistakes, and these kids have watched it all. So, being very mindful about what is healthy and what is unhealthy. And I know from all the work I've done with young people, I know that they're going to draw on the experiences they've had. And unfortunately, their journey is going to be to also undo some of the unhealthy defaults that potentially can potentially have developed from my demonstrating and misunderstanding of what love and relationships look like. So, my kids are going to have their own journey around what love and relationship looks like to them. But I think what I know I'm good at is opening up the floor and holding conversations with my kids. And I think when I worked in schools with young people, I also was very good at holding space and exploring for young people their interpretation of what relationships should or could or would look like. And so when listening to particularly kids in schools, they've all come from different backgrounds, different home environments, and you can feel the essence that has helped shape their worldview. So I'm conscious that what we do in the environment around our children, we live in communities, and so the kids are influenced by, obviously nowadays, social media. One thing that was really big when I worked in schools was young people getting their concept of love and relationships from porn. Even though they're only year 7, 8 or 9, they were still accessing online materials that potentially shaped what they thought relationships should look like. And yet in the real world, when they developed their own relationships, that unrealistic view of porn was not necessarily playing out, and helping young people distinguish between those real and unreal situations. And also in the program LoveBites, run by NAPCAN, in a beautiful program. I mean, I used to run it over 10 years ago, and then and back then it was really about raising red flags for young people, because sometimes, that first love or those first relationships, we get very caught up in what we're new to. We've all been there. We've all been in a new relationship, and you're so naive, and, you have these very different ideas to what is real. And LoveBites was a really powerful program in helping young people identify healthy and unhealthy relationships. And the program would run sections on red flags. So, really helping to identify domestic violent type of relationships, or when someone's being controlling and managing jealousy, and all these really deep things that no one sort of portrays in the Hollywood movie necessarily. Though I do think in the modern era they're getting better and a bit more realistic. But, previously it's very idealistic views on how love and relationships should look, which often undercuts the real view of the tension, the boring bits, the miscommunication, the difference of values, all those things. And so LoveBites was a program we used to run with year 7s, year 8s and year 9s, and really help start, because it's only the tip of the iceberg really, isn't it? But start getting their young forming brains to think a bit beyond what they see in social media or on the Netflix series or TV or porn. So LoveBites was a very powerful program that I used to co-facilitate and help young people distinguish between healthy relationship behaviours and unhealthy relationship behaviours in love and in friendship, right? Because relationships aren't just all romantic. We used to highlight to these young people all the different types of relationships that can exist. And, the kids would brainstorm and come up with the relationship with their pets, the relationship with their coach in footy or netball or swimming, whatever it is, dance, whatever it was that they did outside of school, relationship with their teachers, relationship with their peers and their besties, and the relationship they had with their non-friends. And then you can even be more abstract and like the type of relationship you have with social media or your phone. And it was really important to recognize certain characteristics of relationships that we called red flags, like control, manipulation, isolation, and lack of respect. And we would build these relationship walls of what was a healthy relationship, and they had to go off and brainstorm what were healthy attributes to relationships versus unhealthy relationship attributes. So emphasizing that it's really important to understand the multi-layers of relationships, the different types of relationships. So as a MagnetiK Mumma, parent advocate, I encourage all parents to take a moment and take a step back and have a little, what do you call, inventory of your own relationships and how you present in them, and kind of pull apart what you think are good attributes to have in a friendship, relationship, romantic relationship, your partnership, and differentiate that between how you are in a work relationship or in a community setting, how you connect in relationship. So it's just another layer which I know us parents are already overlaid and overwhelmed with unending responsibilities. But I do think by being observant of your behaviours in relationship now is going to pay dividends down in the future. And as I've said in the past, my training is in health education and health promotion, and you plant seeds now and you see the trees later. So it's not instant gratification work. It's the long haul. It's the process. It's the messiness and unpacking and repacking. So no pressure, right? And I think one thing that's interesting is, I am a very non-perfect human. My relationships are quite messy, and I'm a fiery character, but I'm also a recovering people pleaser, and I've often not had very healthy boundaries, and will either go all out or I will hide and hibernate. Not all of my relationships are always very healthy, and sometimes the kids see that and I lose my shit at my partner, and poor thing, it's probably more frequent than it should be because I just am emotional and super sensitive and always feel like I'm working on trying to be a better version of myself, which can be quite chaotic for my family. Apologies. But I also am conscious that in times that I have made mistakes or I have been inappropriate or I have lost my shit and it's just been rude and mean, then I will apologize and I will acknowledge my bad behavior and kind of hope and reinforce to my young people that that's not actually how good adults behave sometimes. And so I spend a lot of time apologizing, but it also gives me the opportunity to show my children that I'm not I am real and I'm still learning how to be in relationships and trying to improve how I show up in those relationships. And I think even just creating that space for discussion, hopefully will sort of break these generational cycles of, this is how it is and that's how we do it. And blah, 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 blah. And hopefully that's something that my children will be able to work through, and they're going to have to work it out themselves too, right? Like I can only do so much. They will have in their lifetime their own experiences that will shape how they connect with others, and that's fine. But I guess being able to model repair awareness and acknowledging when I'm wrong or I've done the wrong thing or I haven't been as a very nice person or I said some pretty mean words, that I own that and I apologize and I don't excuse it because it's not okay, but it's also I'm human, having a human experience. I think having robust conversations and arguments and disagreements and layers of different values is quite normal. But I guess where relationships can turn a corner and be on a totally different trajectory and tangent is when they become abusive. And now, what is abuse? Abuse is the constant control or physical violence or emotional control and violence on a continuous platform that happens and cycles that happen over and over and over and over again. And that is a totally different vibe to what I'm talking about. And in those situations, there is no one to blame. And even, the thought that just get out of it is too simplistic, because we know that relationships are complex and layered, and that people in those situations can be victims to and subjected to things that we can't even comprehend. And in those situations, and it can also, be in the most unsuspecting spaces. So my point is that in those circumstances, if you know anyone who may be going through that, try and find them help, get around them, give them support, offer, in subtle, non-judgmental ways, because everybody has their own journey. But for the safety of that person and potentially their children, we as a community need to get around them and keep them safe. So that requires a whole different conversation that I'm not trying to address here, but I would like to distinguish it from what I'm talking about, because domestic violence is nuts in Australia, and the fact that there's some crazy statistics still floating around in 2025 that 1 in 4 women are living in domestically violent situations on a day-to-day basis still in Australia is very confronting. What I'm talking about in this podcast today is helping young people identify healthy and unhealthy relationships. And obviously that's in the unhealthy category, but to an extreme. I'm talking about day-to-day relationships that we encounter, and hopefully setting the platform and setting up a space for you guys to explore and create your own safe spaces for relationships to thrive and flourish, because we're all so interconnected that having healthy relationships creates that sense of belonging and feeling connected, and that in essence all goes back to our health and well-being. The more connected, the more we feel loved, the more healthy relationships we have, the healthier our lives are. And one relationship I've been exploring a lot lately is my relationship with nature, and especially in this AI world, and the complexities, and socially we're in this really crux time, like cost of living is expensive, people are working extra hard, we have more than we've ever had before, but we feel like we have less. So it's been a trigger for me to tune back into nature, because nature has the ability to flourish in various different environments, in the way they adapt to the soils and the rocks and the toxins and what have you. So guide me back to the relationship I have with myself, then ripples out to how I relate to others. So, and particularly looking at things at how I handle conflict, and how I can fawn and just hide. And sometimes I people please to just keep the peace, or I might freeze and just like shut down and go hide for a little while. And in some situations, depending how triggered I am, I can like fight and use the most vicious words that I can't even believe come out of my mouth, and then flee. Sometimes I can't get out there quick enough, and I will just avoid and run the other way when something in that relationship has triggered me to feel like I just want to get away from it. And flee, interestingly enough, for me, is an escapism space. So I might not physically flee, but I emotionally flee. And I find when I'm in that mindset, I'll often drink alcohol, and or I'll go listen to music and just want to be alone. So that's another way. Like, I know we talk about fight, fright, flee, and freeze or fawn, but sometimes what each of those look like for others, it will be different to me. But for me, flee means get out of that mindset shift. And sometimes alcohol has been a tool, not that I encourage it, but that's where I've found myself and getting probably into more trouble because I just didn't deal with the situation. And for those who know me, they know I'm just terrible the next day. And then so it kind of makes the whole problem worse, to be honest. But, getting better. I'm working on not shaming myself as much when, perhaps I had a fight response and I lashed out and used very colourful language that probably wasn't very nice. Or maybe, I always have regret, particularly if I'm doing an escapist alcohol night and, I let my tongue run off and, I wake up in the morning with that full hangover guilt, So as I get older and more mature and more tuned in and more aware of how I want my body and intentional with my behaviors and thoughts and emotions, I tend to do that less and less now. And, you know, I pause and I go exercise, or I go do some breath work, or I go do sit in nature. And lately I've been really connecting and asking the trees to witness me, not me witness them witness me. And now, you know, there's a relationship developing there. So I kind of want my kids to see that side of me more than I want them to see the fleeing acopic, go have a few drinks me, because that cycle doesn't always end up very healthy. Whereas I know if I go sit in nature, or if I go do a workout, or if I go for a walk, or I just have that pause, I know that the outcome will be a much more balanced and hopefully more effective and productive kind of outcome versus the flee escapism. And again, it's not about being perfect or perfection. It's just about that awareness, you know. So I really, really invite you to think about your own defaults and what scripts you have, and that you may be subconsciously passing on to your young people about relationships, and particularly your relationship with yourself, and then how you relate to others, and your close relationships, your loving relationships, your romantic relationships, your friendships, your workships, you know, your kids, you and your kids' relationship, and how that plays out in your life at the moment. And something that's very, very interesting, I think, and it kind of brings me back to why this topic is so important, because we know current global trends are changing in terms of population. Youth populations are now being found in African and Asian countries, right? Whereas the European, the Western, the Australian, the US, you know, we're all sort of having like one or two kids, if that, because a lot of people these days are choosing not even to have kids, right? And because the cost of living, the drama, you know, so we're having a whole global landscape change coming up in the future. So I think how we plant the seeds of relationships and all the different types of relationships in our young people now depends how you condition them and shape them and influence them, but can potentially influence how our young people will be able to relationship with this global trend of change. You know, like the globalization, the movement of and migration of humans is evolving, and there is just going to be a very different demographic when they're older. And how are they going to be able to adapt to that? And what kind of relationships will they be having? And I come from an interracial marriage and family, and I think that's going to happen more and more and more as globalization and migration increases. And so it's creating and evolving the human species, to be honest. It's diversifying the gene pool. And so how do we equip our young people to be able to manage the different ways in which they relate to others, so, and how they form relationship with others? And so I think if we sort of hand over the mindset of family, love, partnership, that is compassionate and kind, and therefore they will be more adaptable, resilient, and empathetic to navigate the vast different perceptions of what loving relationships look like, or friendships look like, or work relationships look like, because all the different cultural worldviews will be coming closer and mingling in together. So I hope this triggers something to think about and reflect upon within yourself as a parent. And I promise you, it's not about getting it perfect, and there's no right or wrong answer, but I do think it is about noticing and reflecting on what's working for you and what gives the positive outcomes or what gives the results that you're hoping for, and creating more of those. And I guess that goes back to what are your values, and how do you see relationship in a healthy way for you, and then working out what they are and doing more of that to demonstrate for your kids. So it's about building that awareness and then just allowing yourself to explore and evolve and adapt. It doesn't have to stay the same. And therefore, hopefully passing on a very new version based on old versions of what love and relationship looks like for our young people. So thank you for being here with me in the messy middle. And if this resonates with you, share it, send it to a friend, or leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you or hear any of your reflections. And I will see you in the next podcast. Thank you. Thanks for listening to MagnetiK Mumma. Remember, relationships don't have to be perfect. They just need awareness, repair, and a whole lot of compassion. If today's episode resonated, share it with a friend or leave a review so more parents can find these conversations. And until next time, take a pause, take a breath, and keep modeling the love you want for your kids to inherit.